الإيمان أن السلام حياة قد جاء في القرآن أن السلام.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of iTREND on ITV. This week is Diabetic Awareness Week, and what better than for people who are actively involved in it, not just the doctors, but families and parents who are actively affected by it, to tell us a little bit more about it. Diabetes is something we hear about, we hear the name being rendered about constantly. We always think it happens to older people, we often think it's just a lifestyle that gets affected, but today we're going to find out a little bit more about it, how it affects children, specifically with regards to diabetes type A. Or type 1. Type 1. There we go. And in our studio today, I'd like to welcome a father of a child who has diabetes, Mr. Suhail Ghani. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Suhail, being a dad, we always have mums sitting on these seats telling us about their perspectives. It's so refreshing to have a father sitting here who is actively involved in the care of his child. What has this journey been for you?
It's been a difficult one. I think initially hit us with a shock because we didn't know what it was at the time, and now as we going along, we're finding out more and more. But it's a daily challenge. The child is on insulin therapy or a regime, which has a lot of hit and miss when you dose for a meal. No two meals are the same. No 2 days are the same. You can do the same things every day, but I mean things like the weather, the child's mood, the sleep, the stress, exam time now, all plays an impact. So if you give 1 unit today and the result was fine, you give 1 unit tomorrow, you could have a low or a high, and you need to play around with that. So you basically live every 3 hours, meal by meal, on a daily basis. Between my wife and I, we keep in contact regularly now. Almost literally every mealtime I'll message her or she'll message me, oh, the child's level is this, what do we do? Because there is no formula that says 1 + 1 = 2. Today it equals 2, tomorrow it equals 3, next day it equals 4. So that's the difficulty with type 1 diabetes.
I think that's the one thing that stood out for me so much, because I think many of us don't even realize the impact of how difficult it is on a daily basis. And exactly what you mentioned now, where it was saying that how different every single moment is, how every child is completely different, that no child just fits into a box and says, here's your answer, there you go. How did you even get to the point of diagnosis? Let's start with that.
Okay, so our daughter Iman got sick. Like any child gets sick, and you think, well, it's flu or whatever the case might be. Went to the GP and the specialist, said, listen, they're not picking up anything bacterial, so it's probably viral in the air. There was fever, she was weak, and all the rest. But after a week, she still wasn't getting better, which sort of says, okay, something's not right here. Then I'd taken her for blood tests, and this is when they phoned us in a frantic time from the hospital, say, you need to come straight away. Your daughter's sugar level is 30. Bear in mind, a normal sugar level is between 4 and 6. So she was actually at a point whereby it was close to getting into a coma stage. And we didn't know this disease or this illness existed, to be honest. We thought like 95% of the population in diabetes, now that we know is type 2, you think, well, how can a child become diabetic? And so then they told us, well, this is the case, the sugar level is X, and now that we know, we saw the symptoms, we didn't actually see the symptoms, now that we know what the symptoms are. So Iman had started going to the bathroom quite frequently, but also had been drinking a lot, and I think it was at a time in school where she was participating very actively in sport, which she still does. And you think, well, a child's just normal for them to be thirsty. It's hot summer days, it's hockey, it's netball, yes, and all of the rest. And this extensive thirst, we didn't know, because her room has its own bathroom, that she was frequently in the bathroom 5, 6, 7 times a night. And that, if I can point out, is one of the signs to look out for parents who might come across this at some point, is that if the child is actually waking up to go to the bathroom and has this thirst or is lethargic, which she wasn't. So she just had the thirst and the bathroom incidents. And that's how we found out this. And now looking back, there was a dramatic weight loss, which again, you think, okay, the child's growing taller and growing slender. It's just a normal course of things. But that week of diagnosis, because it had taken that week and her sugar levels were now in the 30s, her body went into what they call ketoacidosis mode. The body started eating itself up, and maybe we'll share that picture with the viewers, but basically her weight is normally 36. It went down to 26 in the space of a week. So she lost 10 kilos, which as a percentage is massive. But again, in our eyes, we didn't see this until we got to the doctors. So we didn't know these symptoms, and luckily we picked it up. I mean, we picked it up late relative to other people, but in time for us to actually make the intervention, to get onto insulin therapy, to correct this and flush out all of this off the system to get it to a normalized level.
So basically what we're looking out is frequenting of the bathroom, very thirsty all the time, and sometimes of considerable weight loss.
So the weight loss will come if you haven't picked it up, but it's the frequent thirst, the insatiable thirst that you just can't quench. Tiredness. So
I was going to ask the loss of energy.
Loss of energy. So a couple of the parents we've spoken to said, my child used to come from school and just fall asleep in the car. And I think that is something that never happened with us, but like I say, it's one of the sides. It's dizziness, it's drowsiness at times. It's a bit of a blurred vision at times as well. So I think parents look out for this. The child says, look, I'm getting blurred vision. Then it's something to consider.
How much of a lifestyle change was it for you as a family?
From an eating point of view, not much. Our house was always low carb. We as a family are conscious of that in terms of eating the right foods at the right times, eating your greens, eating your proteins in whatever way. It's now that we've become super low carb. So now we actually know what affects her sugar level. So we try and avoid those foods. So she can eat everything. And I think that's the misconception out there. She can eat everything, but everything has a different consequence. So if you're going to eat a chocolate today and you dose for it, chances are you'll probably get it wrong because those things have so much variable in it. So you try and eat pure foods, low carb, high protein, good clean foods out there, which the house sort of does do. And the boys have also now switched to this. And you actually see their energy levels have actually changed dramatically.
It's already made a difference for
It's made
everyone.
a massive difference. I mean, one of the worst things for children to eat is actually cereal, now that we know what we know.
Absolutely.
And every household out there is just about saying, the quick
Here's your
meal, what's
breakfast,
it?
yes.
Have your Oaties, have your strawberry pops and rest. But even the good cereals, which are advertised for weight loss and good energy, what's your all brands and all this, all bad.
Yes.
So we actually see now after the fact what it does to the glucose levels.
How difficult has it been for Iman as a pre-teen girl being diagnosed? What has the lifestyle change been for her? Because I often look at children who have been diagnosed with diabetes, and what impresses me so much is their level of maturity, the level of understanding that they have to monitor themselves as they go through, if they're going out to someone's home, how they're eating. How is that for her in terms of the change?
She's very, you know her, so she's a very responsible young person. So she's taken this on as best as I think someone can. I mean, it's a daily 3-hour challenge for her, and she's getting by with it. I think the challenge comes more from the social environment of people saying, oh, but you can't eat this, you're sick. Mm-hmm. Yes, I can. Don't tell me what to do, you know. It's my decision, I'm still normal. So I think it's about people learning and understanding to say, well, this child is still normal. She now wears a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, which now people say, well, what is that? So it's those things that one has to deal with. I'm still normal, which she deals with fantastically well. And again, it's just the fact of being pricked on the finger daily, having 5, 6, 7 injections on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes administered on her own in school. The teachers wouldn't even notice that she's doing it because she's doing it so well at school. So she's coping as best as a type 1 diabetic can.
So within the Muslim community, within a South African context, how well do you think the awareness has been created? Because many of us know diabetes, but we don't even know the difference between the diabetes. We don't know what's prevalent in children, what's prevalent in adults, as we were speaking off camera earlier. How do you think, has the awareness been created sufficiently, or do you think people are becoming more aware of it as we progress?
So there's a very low awareness because 5% of the diabetes population is type 1. So people associate diabetes with the person that has led a sedentary lifestyle, no exercise, poor diets, and all the rest. So that's the diabetes people know. And because people know that, they say, oh, well, if you take this pill or exercise or eat like this, you should be fine. But type 1, you have a malfunctioning organ. So you play the role of this organ that produces insulin. Insulin is needed to give you energy. And if you don't have insulin converting the food, that's, like I say, that's when the body starts eating its fat cells up, and actually you lose that 10 kilos in a week. So it's very, very, there's a low awareness of what type 1 is, and often you get to a place in a social environment and someone says, oh yeah, but that's because she ate too much sweets. I say, no, not at all. Actually, she never ate sweets. In fact, now, to correct sugar lows, she needs to eat sweets. She's eaten more now than ever before because of this, yeah. Because the insulin is actually, I don't want to use the word fatal, but it's a very difficult hormone or drug to use, because, like I say, 1 unit today is not the same as 1 unit tomorrow. So what happens if you use the insulin, actually you end up with the sugar low. The only way to correct it is to have some fast-acting sugar to get yourself to normal levels.
Okay, and then Zaheerah, with regards to, you mentioned earlier that type 1 diabetes is just when your organ doesn't function the way it's meant to. Is that just a random thing? Is there anything people can look out for specifically to see if their children are going to be at risk for type 1 diabetes? Or is this just luck of the draw?
I mean, we've asked the question because we've got 2 other kids, so we want to know, is it genetic? And the answer is no. You might happen that it happens in your house that 2 or all your kids end up with that, but then you're just unlucky. It's a completely random thing. Your pancreas has come under attack by its own immune system, and it's backed up. So that's just what happens. So you could be that unlucky person, or it could be the one in your family. So in our extended family, she's the only person. So if I look at cousins, aunties, uncles, everyone else, she's the only one that has got this illness.
And I know we're reaching towards the end of our segment, but I wanted to discuss with you a video that you presented to us that shows a mum feeding her child during the in the middle of the child's sleep. How prevalent or how familiar is that with you?
Very familiar. So that's the thing. Your daily regime is test, inject, eat. Test, inject, eat, and before sleeping time you'll test. So if a lot of the time the children are already sleeping by the time they call it the 3 hours of the insulin has lapsed, and then they're asleep, so you test and they see the sugar is low. So you actually then you feed them in their sleep more often than not, and sometimes more than once in the night, because the sugar just doesn't want to get up. So in order for you to avoid them going into a coma while they're sleeping, then you'll actually see and test and feed just as this video shows. So this video is posted on one of the forums. So there's on a Facebook forum which we're part of called Kids Powered by Insulin. So it's all the parents who encountered the very same challenges. And when I saw this, I thought I must share it with you, because that is a typical night in the life of a parent of a type 1 diabetic and also of a child. Remember, a lot of these kids get diagnosed 10 months old, 18 months old. What do you do? So those are things that are quite real in terms of diabetes.
And I think it's important for us as the rest of the community to be aware of it, because I think, like you said, there's so many misconceptions we have about what it is, and we don't realize how challenging it is and what a lifestyle change it is for you and your family. So are there any words of advice that you want to give out, perhaps even to families who have children with diabetes, in terms of support networks that are available? Because I know you're involved in many of them.
Yeah, so I think from a support network, I think these days with technology is helping. So we use a continuous glucose monitor, which has helped us understand her daily movements a lot better. So it's to really get involved or find one of those if you're type 1 diabetic, but also seek out the information, which is all it's out there. It's on Facebook, it's on Google, you can just about find anything, but get more information. I think people that are not even in this to sort of learn about it, because it could happen to you the way it happened to us randomly, and we were sort of caught unawares. So yeah, and I think everyone that's a type 1 is fighting the same challenges, so you're not alone, and I think it's important to know that there are people out there who will help and support you. These groups that we met on the weekend with 4 different families, and have the same stories, and it becomes a bit of a community and a bit of a support base. I think it's important to share your stories with those people because there are people who are encountering the same things, and you learn by doing that. Because we picked up a tip from the other lady who said, well, my daughter actually does this when she has a low, and then we realized, and you put it in play, okay, it also sort of works. Find your recipe that works for you if you can, and yeah, just try and be positive about it.
Fantastic. Shukran so much for joining us on air. I think it's been a wealth of information and something that we generally had to know more about. So thank you for creating more diabetes awareness.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
We'll be going for a short break. I think this is awareness that is much needed within our community, something we really needed to learn about, to acknowledge and to accept, as well as to help those families that are going through it as well. Mr. Zaheerah Ghani's social media pages will be up as well if you'd like to be in touch with him to find out more about awareness, to find out more about diabetes type 1. Shukran for joining us. We'll be having a short break and we'll be back shortly. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to iTREND on ITV. We've been continuing our discussion on type 1 diabetes, its significance, the impact and the awareness of it. Chatting to a father of a child who's been going through diabetes. Now we're going to be chatting to a dietitian to talk to us about how we can be more aware of what exactly is required around diabetes. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the studios, Fatima Baks.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Fatima, you are very well known to ITV viewers in any case, so I think very little introduction is needed for that. But for the iTREND viewers, you are one of the most prominent dietitians in the Johannesburg area. You've been involved in a number of fields, but today we'd love to hear your thoughts specifically on diabetes. Following on what our previous guest, Mr. Zaheerah Ghani, was discussing was type 1 diabetes in children. I know we were talking about earlier a little bit off camera with regards to how that varies so much amongst every child and every meal for that matter.
You know, I think with age, and children are growing, so you look at their height, their weight, that makes a difference, the level of activity, the age, and then also the differences in cultural backgrounds. So all of these are factors that actually influence exactly what your requirements are. And even in one particular child, say you have a 10-year-old child who's eating, but if they're physically active or playing sport on a Tuesday and then are not doing anything on a Wednesday, just their insulin requirements will differ. So it is important, and unfortunately we're seeing so many new cases of diabetes in our community, especially in our community from our cultural background. And I think it has a lot to do the way our lifestyles have changed. We look for what's quick and easy,
yes,
and we often replace junk foods. Sometimes we aren't aware of it with actual proper eating, because it's so much easier to actually go either to a shop at a garage or any supermarket and just pick up things that we can just easily put into a child's lunchbox. So yes, we are seeing an increase in type 1 diabetics or type 1 diabetes, and also in the type 2 diabetes, in non-insulin dependent diabetes, we're seeing it in a younger age group. Okay. Previously, it was older people. You'd think, okay, maybe over 40, 50, depending on the lifestyle, your activity, the genetics, the family history and all of that. But now we're actually seeing younger people, and because the sugar levels are so inconsistent or very high most of the time, we've actually had to introduce, or insulin therapy is now recommended in some cases as well, where the sugar levels aren't controlled.
That's actually very scary, because you actually you mentioned a little bit earlier about this quick, easy foods. And very often many of us get caught in this trap, and processed foods, I find, are so easily available that we go, oh, it's just a quick lunch because mums are busy, dads are busy, the homes are constantly busy. What is your advice around processed foods and actually taking the time out to perhaps maybe plan a menu in the week? Would that maybe be a lot easier in terms of it?
I agree totally with you, Zaheerah. You know, planning is of utmost importance. For example, I've been having a busy 3 weeks, and as a mom, you know, if we work, we still have to ensure that we're going to have lunch for our children, you know. So just planning ahead, where I, for example, made this chicken stir fry. It was so easy then to go home and serve it with a wrap and vegetables, you know. But I planned ahead, or I would keep that in mind. So we actually do need to do things like that. It is challenging But if you do have something and you plan ahead, that makes your life so much easier. It also cuts the amount of time spent preparing food. Because then, otherwise I would think, okay, maybe what could I buy? Or what could I then go and get for my child, which will give them some energy, or just in the meantime till I take time to prepare. But sometimes those choices of in-between unhealthy snacks actually on a regular basis, so what you're doing most of the time has a detrimental effect on the child. So on average in my practice, the average I would say sugar intake is say 20 teaspoons a day. So
And that sounds a lot.
It's scary when you look at it, and I challenge your viewers to maybe go and take a teaspoon and sugar and pour out 10 or 20 teaspoons in a glass and see how much, and look at it and ask yourself, will I actually eat that? But in the form of a drink, be it a sports drink or a soft drink, and on a nice hot day, it seems so tempting, so you would be more inclined to have it. And I find those hidden forms of sugar actually it's spiraling and it's on the increase, and we're doing it very, very often. And for me, it's what we're doing most of the time that's important. It's not what we're doing some of the time. So if, say, there are 3 meals a day and there's 7 days in a week, that equates to about 21 meals. So if 2 or 3 are maybe takeouts, but a healthy option, or are really so-called unhealthy, then at least you're eating properly most of the time. But if it's a soft drink that's available at home, at the table, at lunch and supper every day, or a sports drink or even a juice that we're packing into our child's lunchbox, that is just an extra calorie rush which provides energy but nothing else.
Fatima, you just mentioned juices. Very often people are under the perception that, oh, my child won't drink any cold drinks, but they'll have juices. Tell us about the amount of sugars in juices as well.
Zaheerah, what I found that when soft drinks became a so-called bad thing, everyone turned to juices. And unfortunately, we're also seeing a lot of dental caries and all of that, which also contributes to diabetes. So what it is what am I actually eating or drinking for the entire day? So I would normally say, so the most important is 5 a day of fruit and vegetables, which I think 8 out of 10 of my patients don't even have that. Some people say, I might eat a fruit 3 times a week. I might have vegetables twice a week, and that excludes potatoes or sweet potatoes. I'm talking about proper salads or mixed veg and that, And so when it comes to the juice, I would say, fruit actually make very good in-between snacks. So to pack it into a lunchbox, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, even for us, people on the go, it's so easy to carry. But I usually say 1 fruit at a time. So if I had to take an orange, for example, and squeeze it, it's not going to give me a glass of orange juice. At least 3 to 4, maybe 5 oranges, depending on the size, will give me a glass of orange juice. So 1 orange doesn't equate to a glass of orange juice. So in that way, the amount of sugar that it contains, so if I say have a fruit at mid-morning, but if you're going to have a glass of orange juice, you'll be having 5 times the amount of that fruit. So then the amount of sugar that we're taking in is very high. And what we're seeing a lot is insulin resistance. So insulin is released in response to the amount of sugar we have in our blood. So for that amount of sugar in a 250 ml juice, although it's natural, it's still a lot. We still require lots of insulin versus just eating a whole fruit. And again, using orange as an example, you're getting the fiber from the threads, and then you're getting more nutrition, and it keeps you full for a longer time.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's so important, because I didn't even realize the balance between having the fresh fruit and then putting the same 4 times the amount to make a glass of juice, which is also very important. Fatima, with adults in type 2 diabetes, obviously food and diets would be a lot more, I don't know if regulated is the right word, as compared to type 1 diabetes in children, because there's so many variables there. Are there that many variables in type 2 diabetes as well as you get older?
When I speak to patients with diabetes and I actually tell them what I tell you to eat is what we're all supposed to be eating. So there again, it also depends on the level of activity, because we're seeing adults actually more sedentary.
Yes.
Children are still more active. So that's where there would be a difference in their intakes. So you look at the level of activity, and the recommendation is 150 minutes a week, which is actually very little. It works out to just 30 minutes 5 times a day. But There's also the research has done is sitting the new smoking. So yes, you can go for your 30-minute walk, but what are you actually doing for the rest of the day? So where adults are concerned, that variable plays a very important part. Because if I had to take, say, a 40-year-old female who's sedentary, depending on what she does for a specific day, her intake will be totally different from another 40-year-old who is perhaps exercising for an hour a day, who is also moving more, you know, versus sitting behind a table. So then that plays an important part. But I actually just say, go back to what's the basics, what is natural. Going back to what I mentioned about the 5 a day, I mentioned the 2 fruit, and the other 3 servings is just 2.5 to 3 cups of veggies a day. The easiest way to include it is to ensure that half the lunchbox or your plate at lunchtime and your plate at dinner time is half veggies. So in our case, where say we would typically make, say, chicken curry and rice, where in the chicken curry there's potato and then you have the rice. If you skip out your salad or the veg part of that, you're not going to be satisfied. So you're going to then want to have more. So you have more protein or more carbohydrate. And so I usually say, as if there's no color in your plate, you must know there's something missing, because your veggies and your fruit, it's nature's box of crayons, literally, and that's what colors your plate. And if you have the salad there, then you're more likely to have, say, your 1 to 2 pieces of chicken, which is a fine serving for your protein. And in terms of rice, it's 1 to 2 servings of, it's a fistful of a pasta or a rice is 1 serving. And I usually tell people 1 to 2. Don't go more than 2 as a general rule. Yes. Obviously, it's individualized. And if there's potato in the curry, then you cut down the amount of rice. So that's what I would call a balance. And if you actually eat proper food, and I know from my children, especially my 5-year-old, if she goes and has, whether it's juice, and often we would just keep fresh juice, and if you're getting visitors, or sometimes I would squeeze it and leave it there. She would have it, and then she would run around. But I know that she's not full. Yes. And she's not satisfied by it. Versus if I leave a whole apple or a whole peach, I know that's going to keep her full for an hour or 2, and then it's time to give her food. But you just see they do not get irritable or agitated, you know,
because the sugar's not spiking.
And then
constantly.
in terms of diabetes, it is so important. There you do in a way count the carbs. So you will look at. Definitely won't exceed 2 servings of carbohydrate, and you will make sure that it's split exactly. You don't want those spikes and troughs. You want it to be regulated to a balance.
So basically, all your advice is something that any of us can, well, all of us should be doing in any case, not just people with diabetes.
I agree, Zaheerah. A lot of people think, they say, I cook differently. And the way they say it's like they feel almost alienated from everyone else. And I say to them, that's not what I'm telling you. You should be feeding your family. It's not only you. They also need to eat healthy. You cannot say, I'm not going to have a soft drink, but then you give it to your family. Because especially if there is a family history, those children are going to also develop the habit. And then they would be more inclined to develop diabetes at a younger age.
And then also, Fatima, coming into, we've discussed like processed foods and things like that. Okay, so we've discussed you just have to be organized, start planning early on, so perhaps our viewers can start maybe on the Sunday, make sure they've got the week plan ahead, Monday do the shopping, so that everything is in place to make it easier for us. What is, very quickly, suggestions that we could utilize in school lunches?
Okay, so the one thing I know that children always like is cucumbers. I don't know, very few children don't like that, or carrots. So those are the easiest, actually, you don't have to think about it. And then you must ensure there's fruit in the lunchbox. And it's amazing how they're drawn to colors. So, and our fruit and vegetables are colorful. And then nuts like almonds, I find they're very, very helpful. So if a child isn't that hungry, but they're picky, we get a lot of picky eaters, nuts are very good fat. It's a beneficial fat. It's monounsaturated, so it keeps you full for a longer time. It's a good beneficial fat that's going to keep you full without causing, for example, increasing cholesterol levels or anything. Then if you want to look for a quick and easy way to you could do a peanut butter sandwich. I know most people are inclined to a nut paste that is very well advertised, but it definitely doesn't keep a child full. And I think what I'm seeing often now, even more important than that lunchbox, so you've got your veggies in terms of, say, cucumbers and carrots, you've got a fruit, you've got a fat in terms of your almonds, and then you can give them a protein. So for the older children, say stir-fried chicken in a salad. I know my older daughters, my teen, they love salads, so you can do that. And if they want it separate just the salad and the chicken, they can put it in together. So that's nice. And then if they do want an open sandwich or even a close, just a slice of, say, peanut butter and water instead of juice or a soft drink. But I just think that it's so important that we do send them a healthy lunchbox. But more important than that is what they eat for breakfast before they leave home. Because all of these sugar-flavored cereals, I'm seeing that contain no fiber at all. And we're leaving early, right? Because we live where, even if it's a short distance, in terms of traffic, it takes longer to get to school. So if we're feeding them, say, a high-sugar cereal at 6:45 even, some people leave home at that time, or at 6:30. By 7:30, definitely by 8 o'clock, they're hungry again, and their break is only at 10.
Absolutely.
So for me, I feel the most important is breakfast as well.
I must agree with you, Fatima. I can't believe our time is up already. Thank you so much for joining us on air and for sharing such a wealth of information with us.
Thank you so much, Zaheerah, for helping me. It's been a pleasure.
We have learned so much about diabetes, type 1 diabetes. Briefly, we've spoken about type 2 diabetes, but I think what Fatima has mentioned should be applying to all of us generally in ensuring that we have good eating habits in our home, that our children have good eating habits, because it's not just about diabetes, it's about making sure that we are healthy generally as well. And we want to ensure that our kids are not slumping due to these sugar highs. Let's try and stay away from the processed foods. And as Fatima said, the key word is just planning. Let's plan ahead of time so that we can do the best for our families. Stay tuned. When we come back after the break, we'll be chatting to our next guest. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And continuing with an awareness month, today we're very proud to welcome Nyasha Mokowane, a social worker from NISA. NISA is an organization that needs very little introduction. It's an organization that has been operating in Lenasia and in Soweto and does a lot of work around women's abuse and social and women's development within various areas. Nyasha, welcome to the studio.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on. I'm hoping that we can pack this into the last segment as much as we possibly can. With the 16 days of activism that are upcoming, what are the plans of your institute and organization?
So the NISA Institute for Women's Development is an organization that is always participating in the 16 days of activism since South Africa adopted the 16 days. So as an organization, we're going to have our AGM on the 7th of December at the Beit Nur Hall in Lenasia. We're also having a roadshow in Orange Farm where we are going to be highlighting and raising awareness against gender-based violence. And let me state that when we say gender-based violence, we're not talking about women only, because men also get abused. So we're trying to get that information out there that should you be in a abusive situation, you know where to go, you have the resources, and we also give counseling and legal references. So it's something that's important to our work, and it's one of our highlights of the year, this time of the year.
Have you found that the awareness campaigns have worked in order to bring gender-based violence more out so that people are aware that there are avenues that they can tap into, that women are being able to, and I'm using women, I do apologize, but women and men who have been abused are able to stand up and say, no more, I know that there's places available for help, I can leave here, I don't need to be staying in these situations?
Yes. For the past 24 years, since the inception of the 16 days of activism, South Africa has been active since 1994, and I would like to say that the department and the South African government have been quite helpful and have been instrumental in ensuring the success and making sure that the message goes out and the awareness continues. So we're hoping that with each and every year, we are coming closer to a point where peace on earth comes from peace within the home.
And I think that's so important because we often forget that the family life is such a central point to any form of stability within a community in any case.
That's right. We find that with the more awareness that we do and with the more people understand what are the types of abuse and how to get help and should you need legal recourse, we're hoping that as that continues, we might have to work ourselves out of a job. because violence in the home is not something that we should hope that it be perpetuated.
Yes. And you've also mentioned that there's a hotline that's now also available for people who need it.
Yes, the Department of Social Development started a hotline. It's 0800 428 428. So this hotline is where you can call. It's toll free. And should you be in a vulnerable position, should you need counseling, or should you need direction as to where's your nearest organization that can help you with counseling and or GBV services, you can do so.
Tell us a little bit about the difficulties that you are seeing in the build-up to the 16 days of activism. What have been the kind of cases that are you seeing that are prevalent?
Well, what we're seeing is that we're working a lot with girls these days because girls are particularly vulnerable. And the latest statistics are saying that the girls who are getting the most HIV infections out of any demographic in South Africa are those who are 15 to 25. So young girls are vulnerable because there's a lot of surge of transactional sex where girls have money. Girls sleep with men for money. And that's because perhaps it's poverty or perhaps it's the love of a flashy lifestyle. So we're trying to raise awareness against that. One of that is the book that you have here that is called We Are Those Girls.
And this was the book that came out of Nisa where young girls wrote their stories.
Yes, and we're also trying to educate them on the dangers of social media. You may not necessarily be a naughty girl, so to speak, but perhaps you have a WhatsApp or a Facebook or a Twitter and you interact with all sorts of people. So we're also trying to educate and empower the girl to realize that yes, you can talk to a boy that you may not know on WhatsApp, but how far are you going to take it? We have one story there where a girl ends up going to KZN because she was in a WhatsApp group to meet a boy that she had never met before. Luckily, nothing happens and she's safe, though she gets lost and she's able to get home. But as much as it's a story where she was traumatized, it's something that we're hoping that we can educate other girls to use social media effectively and safely.
You see, the social media always worries me. In this last week as well, we've been discussing with a lot of parents about these sites that have come up where I find that it's such an objectification of the youth, of their bodies and that. And how do we educate parents to be more active? Because I'm assuming that, you mentioned social media groups like WhatsApp groups, Facebook, Instagram, all these other social media things. How do we educate parents to say we have to be active in our parenting in order to be able to look out for these things in our children?
Well, I think that when it comes to social media, when you're dealing with a 13-year-old girl, as much as she wants the latest iPhone or the latest Samsung, there also has to be boundaries. What we do, we also offer counseling. So if there's a parent, a mom or dad who would like to know more, they can come to our offices because we also have a date rape campaign where we speak about these particular issues, about dating, about social media, about making sure that you are safe. So it would be beneficial that the moms and dads come and speak to us or download our book from the website.
So the book is accessible on the website as well?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic.
It is.
And we will be providing the website details so people can access these stories, because I think for me is how real it is. It's not just out there, it's not just somewhere else, it's actually happening to our youth at the moment.
Yeah.
Nyasha, when you're doing the cases that you're doing and the stories that you see, the one thing that I've got to ask you is, the misconception is, it only happens in a certain community or it only happens amongst a certain race. You obviously see problems that go across all race groups, across all economic backgrounds, across all social backgrounds.
Yes. Gender-based violence can affect anyone, whether you're middle class or whether you're in a poverty situation, whether you are black or white or Indian. And what we do is we are very sensitive to other people's cultures, to other people's religions. And should you be in a position where you don't know what to do and according to your religion, we also have counselors of different backgrounds. So you mustn't feel alienated because the counselor that you are seeking may not necessarily understand all the tenets of your religion. We also have a book that we published in 2013 that might also highlight that. It's called Rising Up, Moving On, and it's also available on our website. That one really highlights GBV, where that is the main crux of our work, where we have highlighted the stories of our former clients who may have been in a difficult situation from different provinces, from different socioeconomic backgrounds and religions. So we wouldn't want someone to feel alienated or isolated and feeling hopeless as to there's no one to help. We are free and open to any woman in South Africa who would need help.
Okay. What would be considered that call? What would it take for that woman to make that call, to call you and say, I need help?
The first thing would be information, and to identify that the situation that you are in is toxic. And what we do is we also help to demystify myths. Women would believe that, well, I can't make it on my own, or I must stay for the sake of the children. But what we've noticed is that, and considering that we've got a shelter, the moment you have a 3-year-old child, whether it's a boy or a girl, they're already observing what goes on in the house, and they are seeing the abusive behavior. That abusive behavior might carry on into school, into preschool, and then you hear stories of the child is a bully and the likes. So we try first and foremost to inform the woman, and we do not direct the woman as to what to do. We say that we would like you to have self-awareness and self-actualization. So what we do is we guide you through the process so that you can empower yourself and say, actually, all I want to do is get a protection order and stay in the marriage. We want to get marriage counseling, or I want to leave. There's never a cookie cutter way of dealing with a woman. We deal with everyone as an individual, and we take a look at your circumstances, and at the end of the day, you're the one who says, for my marriage to work, I must do this, or my marriage is unredeemable, so I will do A, B, C, and D.
I think you've highlighted so many points just in that alone, in terms of how kids start mirroring what they see at home, because you rightly said, so many women say, I can't leave because financially I won't manage on my own. I can't leave because my kids won't have a solid enough home. So what I love about what you've responded with is the fact that Nisa doesn't say to women, oh, well, it means if you've come here, you've got to end your marriage. It means, let's see how we can, what are the steps you need to take as an individual. And I love the fact that you empower women to be able to understand what they need to do for themselves.
Yes, we've got a network of other organizations that help us. So for instance, if you would like Islamic counseling, there's Islamic Care Line. If you would like marriage counseling generally, we've got FAMSA. We've got legal resources. We have a domestic violence legal clinic that is graciously hosted by Fask and Martineau, who are based in Sandton. So they come and they give legal advice, and should you need a protection order. And if you're in a position where your life might be in danger, that is when we would give you the option is if you would like refuge in our shelter.
And obviously your shelter is very privately spaced, so people do not have access to that just online. But how has the response been to you providing the service within a community that may not necessarily want to acknowledge the fact that gender violence is a problem?
Well, we have been getting increasing support from the community.
Fantastic.
So I wouldn't want to say that in Lenasia or in Soweto, people do not want to acknowledge that gender-based violence is a reality. We do have quite a number of organizations, quite a number of companies, and quite a number of individuals in the Lenasia community especially that come and they help or they donate things. So it's not necessarily us going against the community, but it's us working with the community and the community also supporting us as well.
What I love about that is that it's no longer a hidden topic. People, the fact that, as you mentioned, the community is more open to it, they're involved in it, they're actively helping out, means that awareness has been working, that people want to see the difference, not just for themselves, but for their own daughters.
Yes, that's right. And that's good to see. There's no point in putting the dirt under the rug, and with counseling, surely the problem will get better. So that's what we strive for.
Okay. So in this 16 days of activism that you've got coming up, you've mentioned the AGM, you've mentioned the roadshow that you are going to be doing. Do you? One thing I've always wondered is, do you actually see a drop in the statistics of abuse being reported during that time because of the amount of awareness being created?
Well, we don't have a measure for that. But the reality is that gender-based violence, violence against women, and gendered violence in itself is such a problem. The stats of rape are not necessarily going down. The stats of GBV are not necessarily going down. All the more reason to necessitate our work and to escalate our work. So we're hoping that in the next decade or so, then we'll see a change. Yes, people might be privy to that and celebrate with us, but it's up to that person at the end of the day to go back home and to be a better husband or to be a better wife. I could not speak for all of South Africa, but we're hoping that things would change. And the more we do our work, the more surely that things will change.
Thank you so much for joining us on air and sharing with us your wealth of knowledge. I think it's so good to put the faces in front of the organizations that are heading up these 16 days of activism. We take our hats off to you and your organizations for the services that you do provide to the communities, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
It's been such a pleasure. I think there have been so many points that have been raised by Anyasha with regards to self-actualization, self-esteem, building ourselves up to know what we deserve. And I think it's also very important for our children. And when we mention the social media groups, it's not just for the girls in the community, but it's also as mothers of boys to know how are we going to raise our boys to be gentlemen? How are we going to raise them to treat women well? And I think that goes hand in hand with how we're going to be raising our daughters to know what to expect and to understand what respect is, what love is, and what abuse is. So on that very heavy note, I do hope that today's episode has filled you with a lot of awareness, with education, and to keep up with what's trending within this month and in this coming month. Please do log onto these sites, get involved, see how you can take it into your various communities, into your towns, and get involved with organizations like NISA that are running in your own towns. And if you don't have anything there, contact them and they'll help you in terms of advising you how to go about doing things. Thank you so much for joining us on air today. We look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.